Hi, Sam.
Hi, Hannah. How are you doing today?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks to you. I'm good. How are you?
Well, thanks to me, also, you might be a little stressed.
No, you're good.
Okay. I was not expecting us to record a podcast today, or at least not about this topic, which we'll reveal in a second.
Yeah, because I didn't fully pitch it to you. I said something in passing and then got confused as to why you weren't like, that's an amazing idea. Let's do it immediately.
But then once you explained it to me, I was like, that's an amazing idea. Let's do it immediately.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to be talking about emotional labor.
We're going to be talking about emotional labor and linguistic creep.
So did you study this stuff in college? I would imagine you did.
I read the book this isn't a book episode, okay, because the bigger conversation is not going to be about the book. But I did read the book in question in college. Shout out to Laura Hirschfield, my thesis advisor, who loved this book and probably continues to love it. I don't know. We're going to talk today about the phrase that was coined in this book, emotional labor, and how the meaning of this phrase has grown and evolved over time. And what are our thoughts on that evolution? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How is it gendered? And what can we learn, I guess, from each of the concepts that the phrase emotional labor encapsulates and the fact that emotional labor has grown in this direction in terms of its meaning. Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start by telling you about The Managed Heart, Commercialization of Human Feeling by Arlie Hochschild. This is a book that came out in the early 80s, and it was ethnography of 3 different groups: flight attendants, servers, and bill collectors. So these are people, mostly women, with a profession that means that as part of their livelihood, they need to cause other people to feel a certain way. They need to interface with clients or customers and get them to feel a certain way, usually by projecting a certain emotion within themselves. And the book talks about how this emotional labor that these workers perform is gendered. This is something that we most generally expect out of women in the workplace, and that jobs that necessitate this emotional labor tend to mostly employ women. Hochschild identified 3 strategies that workers use when they're performing emotional labor, and these are cognitive, bodily, and expressive strategies. So cognitive strategies involve invoking ideas and images inside your own head that bring the sort of emotions that you want to perform. So, like, go to your happy place, think happy thoughts, and in doing so, you will be able to project an image of serenity that will cause your customer or stakeholder to be calm. Bodily would be like the kinds of emotional regulation strategies that you and I have been talking about a lot lately, deep breaths, having something tactile available to you, just anything that like calms your body down, because when you can calm your body down, your emotions will follow suit. And expressive, which is like, I don't know if you've ever seen clips of people like in workshops, like biting a pencil to cause a smile, or like standing in a circle and going, ha, 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 ha. Like if you take on the physical expression of the emotion that you're trying to project, that it will bring up that emotion within you. I wanted to ask, because you have a job where you are interfacing with very stressed out people a lot of the time.
Well, for those who are just tuning in now, which, I mean, at this point, we gotta have like millions of followers already, so I'm sure you already know. But by this point, if you don't already know, I am a pharmacist and I work in retail. So I get to be both the person who you're seeing people sometimes at their most vulnerable times in their life, and also then it being retail, you are in a customer employee interaction, which itself brings a similar but slightly different dynamic. So you're getting an intersection of 2 arguably highly emotionally labor intensive jobs.
And like, I guess the thing that is feeling salient to me right now is that, like, being a retail pharmacist, you're having to communicate something to people that is bad news for them, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, usually insurance.
Yeah. But as I was like going through these strategies, I mean, do you use cognitive, expressive, or bodily strategies when you are doing emotional labor on the job?
I don't really think about it in that way, but I guess giving words and language to it, it maybe will start to make me think about the ways that I may be doing that. I think anyone working in retail can tell you about their customer service voice.
Yep. Mine was about an octave higher than my normal speaking voice.
It's higher. There's typically, you ended in more of a
question
mark or a suggestion rather than a command or a declarative statement. So I guess that would be kind of like the expressive in a way.
Yeah, I think so.
Cognitively, you mentioned happy place, and I don't think about that prior to, but I will tell you that something I do notice is how much tension and stress that I hold in my body both before and after work, that it's taken me years to realize how much of an impact it has on me and how tired I am.
So tell me about how you dealt with that fatigue on the job and in transitioning back to your personal life when you first started versus how you handle it now. Like, what skills have you developed over these years to perform and manage the emotional labor?
So when I first started, especially within the first month of starting to work, as anyone who gets a college degree and then goes on to work in that field can tell you, there's so much that you don't learn until you're actually on the job. So there was that bit of it going on where not only, and most of it has to do with the logistical components, not so much the medicine or health components. Like, you learn all that in school, but we learn kind of how insurance works, but it's not really until you see it and how it affects people's day to day that you really begin to understand, okay, this is how our American healthcare system works. You get expensive medications that are prescribed that the doctors don't know are expensive, and they send it in and it's not covered. So then you send a fax, which it's incredible that in the year 2026, that fax is still the primary method of communication between doctor's office and pharmacies and insurance companies. But alas, faxes are the primary source of communication between doctor's offices, insurance companies, and pharmacies. And so obviously half the time either the doctors don't receive the fax, or we're talking about things where people get a medication that they should maybe start taking that day, ideally, and if it's not something that's going to be covered right away by their insurance and the doctor's got to complete more paperwork, it's going to be at least a 5-day turnaround.
Oh my God, that sucks.
At least. And honestly, it's more likely to be a week or more. And so, I'm learning all this stuff on the job in my first month of working. And obviously then having to learn, how am I going to communicate this to someone? And also realize that I have to do it in a way that is somewhat expedient, because right behind them is someone else who's waiting on their medication and who has questions about it and who I have to be able to shift. And, I can't linger on any one person for too long. So I think part of what I've learned over these past 5 years is how to, number one, just having the knowledge of how these things work to be able to communicate them quickly, efficiently, while also giving enough time with any single person for them to be able to kind of address their concerns as best as I can. Basically just having the language already worked out because I've said it hundreds or thousands of times.
Yeah. Okay. So scripting.
Yes. Scripting, I think, would be very appropriate for me. I have things that I'm sure I don't even realize that I'm saying over and over again, but I'm sure if you were a little fly on the wall in the pharmacy as I work, you would hear things that I say just over and over again that are just, a cognitive shorthand for communicating information in as caring a way as possible. I think anyone who works in healthcare or just in
Care work.
any kind of care work where you're trying to assist someone, like even as a lawyer, you're going to have this tug between becoming emotionally invested in the people you're caring for and the weight that that emotional investment can place on your daily life.
In 1983, Hochschild argued that service workers who have to perform emotional labor as part of their jobs become estranged from their own feelings when they're in the workplace. Do you think that's true? Do you think that there's like kind of a dissociation happening where you're separating yourself from your own feelings and just getting through the interaction?
Yeah. For me personally, yeah, I feel that. And I think that's really what drains me the most is I'm a people pleaser. So I can put my own current comfort on pause to make someone else feel better without even realizing that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And so after doing that for 9 or 12 hours, I then am exhausted, spent, ready to go home, lay down, probably scroll through my phone for a little bit, go to sleep. So I guess that's kind of my method of coping, which I think at this point I would say I would consider it healthy. I think I've come to a healthy work-life balance with my job.
Well, I think it also helps that you're able to work part-time.
Yes.
I think if you were doing this full-time, it would be a lot more taxing.
Yes. And I have done the full-time, and I will say that at least for me, I don't know that I could work 40 hours a week and do it for, the rest of my working career. It would take too much of a toll on me. I wouldn't have enough time to recuperate from the stress that even now as a more experienced pharmacist, I still feel.
Yeah, although it's less intense.
Oh yeah, definitely less intense. I think if I were, as probably many of the people that Hochschild studied in this ethnography, they probably didn't really have the option of whether they wanted to work part-time or not. They probably were working full-time, and that was just to make ends meet.
I don't know what it was like to be a flight attendant in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
Do you think that the fact that you are a man and a white, cis, masculine presenting man at that affects how easy or difficult it is for you to perform emotional labor, by which I mean not how easy or difficult it comes to you, but how easy or difficult it is for you to get the emotional response out of the person that you're talking to that you want because of that authority that these immutable attributes about you lend you.
Most definitely. I generally, when I'm working, just wear scrubs. Like, I don't even wear a white coat. So that's part of the reason that people are sometimes surprised that I'm a pharmacist, because I'm not usually presenting as a pharmacist, just in attire.
Yeah, because you're just allergic to hierarchy.
Yeah, that, and I just the white coat just adds an extra layer of heat that I don't often like when I'm moving around. Yeah, it's definitely more comfortable just to wear scrubs. But anyways.
Scrubs have always looked incredibly comfortable to me.
Yeah, they definitely are. But my point there is that, or the reason I bring that up is because if, say, a older female technician were to come over who in attire really looks exactly like me, I think that in their case, they would probably have to put on more of an air of authority to be able to convey the same information and have the same messages being understood because of how they appear. So in regards to
the way that they appear, which is to say, as a woman and perhaps as a person of color, that the customer doesn't assign as much automatic authority to the facts that they're conveying.
Right.
So they have to
and we're talking generally here, not in every case, obviously. But yes, I think that what you're trying to get at is that emotional labor requires more effort the more you deviate from the white male cis
I don't think I'm trying to get at anything.
Well, or the point that I'm hearing,
Yeah.
I guess, maybe not what you're trying to say.
I'm trying to ask questions.
Yeah.
I don't have an agenda. I've never been a feminist in my life.
Well, I'll be the feminist for you.
I work at a large bureaucratic nonprofit where I handle communications for a lot of different departments. And I have to communicate, no, our policy is that we need at least 5 days notice. No, we can't send out your event to that big of an audience. We are sending out too many other communications for too many other departments. Here is what I can do for you instead. And what I've noticed talking to my colleagues who are men, and in particular, I talked to a colleague who was a trans woman who transitioned on the job. And like, she was able to tell me how, this was very validating, this conversation with her, how much like after she started presenting as a woman and being perceived as a woman, how distrustful people became and how much they did not respect her, pushed back against her, appealed to her boss. And that was very validating because I was like, I struggle with this so much. I have to like borrow my boss's authority so much. Is it something I'm doing? And some of the tactics that I've used to address this have been, sometimes I will just say very authoritatively, no, I can't do that for you. Our policy is XYZ. Other times I pick up the phone and I find that like talking to somebody in real time with your tone of voice helps a lot. And I get a little informal and I get a little friendly. And I say, I convey in my tone and the words that I use, I'm on your side. I wish I could do this for you, but unfortunately I can't. Here's what I can do instead. I know it sucks. How's this work for you? Or it's just genuine information gathering. What outcome are you trying to make happen? And then I listen to what they have to say and propose a solution based on that. But yeah. I'm definitely like mediating the fact that my gender lends me a lack of authority.
Yeah.
By endearing myself to the people on the job. And I'm just curious to what degree you observe that among your colleagues, to what degree you do that yourself, and if your gender affects like what kind of tactics are effective for getting the emotional reaction out of your customer that you want.
Yeah. It's hard for me to answer that question because, as you just said, I preload any negative news with at the end of it, I can't do this for you, but I can do this. Whereas with some of my other colleagues, they may not know exactly what they can do. They just know that we can't do the one thing. So because part of this is just because I have more experience and also as a pharmacist maybe know broader scope of the situation, I can offer more of what can be done, whereas they just know what can't be done. And therefore, there's a difference there in how effective my communication might be versus theirs. So it's hard for me to answer that question and how gender comes into play with that.
Right. I was very interested to hear stuff about your personal experience with emotional labor. But yeah, let's get into the linguistic creep part of the conversation.
What is linguistic creep?
Linguistic creep is when the meaning of a word or phrase slowly changes over time, usually becoming broader and broader. So an example of this, if you are a very online person who's like kind of left-leaning, you probably are familiar with how gaslighting has come to mean so much more than what it initially meant. Like so much so that it is one of my go-to like first examples of linguistic creep. Originally stemmed from this classic movie where this abusive husband messed with the gas lights in the home, causing the lights to constantly flicker. And when his wife told him so, he said, you're seeing things. And it referred to an abuse tactic where the abuser straight up denied objective reality in order to make their partner question their own perception of reality and start to think that they can't trust the evidence in front of their eyes and into their ears.
Typical patriarchy stuff.
Yeah, typical abuser
Toxic
stuff.
masculinity.
Toxic masculinity is another, I feel like, phrase that has been subject to linguistic creep. But yeah, so now people use the word gaslighting to refer to somebody saying, just something that kind of invalidates their feelings, right? Whereas like originally you would only call something gaslighting. It's an abuser who is straight up denying objective reality in order to make you think that you're insane. And yeah, toxic masculinity, let's go with that. It's another example. Toxic masculinity meant a form of masculinity defined by violence or the potential for violence, right?
Mm.
And now it means any masculinity that maybe we find distasteful, any form of masculinity that like is characterized by attributes that are also bad, but not violence, right?
Would you, in the classic definition of toxic masculinity, would you consider the classic definition of gaslighting as classic toxic masculinity?
No.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't. I do think that gaslighting is a form of violence, but when I think of toxic masculinity based on its initial definition, I'm thinking I derive my sense of my own manhood from the fact that I could punch you out, that I could beat somebody up. Not necessarily a woman, just another person, that I wield the potential for violence and that I am willing to do violence. I think of gaslighting as an abusive and manipulative tactic that abusers use. So like it's related. Another example, the euphemism treadmill is a phenomenon by which a clinical or just definitional word that is not really negative in the first place becomes a slur. So we come up with a different euphemism. So the example is the R word that we use to talk about people with cognitive disabilities. That was just a diagnosis, and then it became a slur. And then the preferred term became slow, and then that became an insult. And then the preferred term became developmentally disabled, and then that became an insult. And the euphemism treadmill will just keep on flowing as long as the stigma remains on this group of people. When I talk about linguistic creep in the context of emotional labor, I'm thinking of a term that referred to a specific thing and then became broader and broader and broader. Intersectionality. Initially referred to the intersection of blackness and womanhood in U.S. culture, I think. Actually, I'm not sure about the U.S. part, but the intersection of blackness and womanhood, how those two specific identities intersected to create a unique experience of a cultural hierarchy that includes racism and sexism.
Yeah.
But now people will kind of use it to talk about how does my disability intersect with my gender? Or how does my sexual orientation intersect with my religion? It's getting at something that the original term was coined to get at, but it's broadening it.
Yeah.
And in that case, I think that's a great example because it also kind of plagiarizes the work of Black feminists, which is something that happens a lot on the internet and off the internet.
Yeah.
Which I think is like a big part of the conversation about linguistic creep.
And in that regard, I have a question for you about linguistic creep in terms of the word woke.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. That one kind of creeped off in two different directions.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the question?
Well, I mean, is it an example of linguistic creep?
Totally, I think so, yeah.
Because I was thinking that it was too. And it's also interesting how it, like you said, in two different directions in the sense that people on the left began using it to mean, like, in the original sense, and please correct me if you know more than I do, but it's my understanding that the original sense of the word woke was referring to, in the Black community, for people to stay somewhat hyper aware of their surroundings and how themselves being Black could interact with their environment to cause certain negative social outcomes. Maybe that was...
like getting stopped by the cops or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was like, stay woke it came from a song, I think. It was stay woke as in be aware of what you do and how much risk that you are under based on the way that you present to the world because of your race, but also stay woke as in be aware of the conditions that underlie that material reality and the fact that they are not because you did something wrong. Stay woke to the history of racism and the way that it surrounds us in order to avoid internalizing the idea that this negative treatment is because of your own inferiority.
Right.
The other example that I had thought of but then forgot about was the male gaze. The male
now
gaze...
it talks about males who are gay, right? I feel like that's the only time I hear that nowadays is whenever someone's like, "Oh yes, the male gaze."
No, the male gaze referred to filmmaking. It was a term only about filmmaking and about how films are shot in such a way as to like cater to what the filmmaker imagines that the heterosexual male would like to see.
So much of that going on in anime.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But then people talk about the male gaze as like a sense that women have even when we're alone of what we would look like imagined observer. And now people have started saying the female gaze, which I don't even know what that's supposed to mean because as you can hear from my tone, like I feel like a lot of the time when this linguistic creep happens, it's completely natural and I completely understand not just why it happens, but the efficacy of broadening these definitions. And then other times it makes me roll my eyes and I think in losing the original definition, we are like moving toward such a vague definition of this term that it doesn't mean anything and it's not useful anymore.
Right. Like woke.
Yeah, and it just becomes like something that you lob at people as a cultural identifier to be like, I think that you're bad. You know?
Yeah, and I think in some sense you could talk about how woke was used on the right as more and more of an insult and thus became less of a legitimate way of orienting oneself as in the world as compared to what it originally the situations and communities in which it was used originally.
Critical race theory, which referred to like a subset of law. It was a study within the academic field of law to understand how racial inequities affected law. And now there's a whole federal moral panic about critical race theory that stigmatizes as unpatriotic, un-American, and necessary to censor any speech that acknowledges the reality that racial inequities shaped American history. That is so much broader. Neither, I think, definition is inherently objectionable.
Yeah.
But it's so much broader.
Yeah.
And in broadening that definition, I think that the right wing has been able to kick up a moral panic about insufficient patriotism and, you know, fragile white feelings. So I've heard people use emotional labor to refer to everything from talking to a friend when they're sad to keeping track of what groceries you're running out of in the house and whether we need to pick up more toilet paper and which kid has soccer practice tonight, right?
So specifically in regards to like a household where two adults are coordinating with each other.
Usually, yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't. I guess my question here would be, I wouldn't think you would hear emotional labor in like for someone who lives on their own being like, I gotta go get groceries today. Gotta go do some emotional labor for myself. That's not a situation where I would feel I have heard emotional labor used. I'm just trying to clarify. Emotional labor still retains the original definition's sense of an
imbalance between the genders.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was about to get at.
Yeah.
That like because the original definition of emotional labor was from a sociology book, but like a gender theory book, right? Like a sociology of gender book. And it was about this feminized labor that was like most strongly associated with women, that like people started to think more broadly about what Harley Hochschild referred to as emotional work, like the emotional work that you do in your personal life, the degree to which women are expected to soothe men's feelings, the degree to which women are willing to effortfully build community and relationships with each other that men aren't, so that we are well supported and men aren't. And so that when men and women are in relation to each other, men rely emotionally much more on women than vice versa. This is the commentary that I'm summarizing, right? I'm not necessarily signing off on it. And then I think from there it expanded to like the division of household labor, what in sociology we would call invisible labor. The labor that goes into keeping a home running and functional. And that includes doing the dishes, planning the meals, making sure that all the supplies are stocked, making medical appointments, keeping track of extracurriculars. And especially people talk about this not just in terms of the literal tasks, but in terms of the mental work. That there's a dynamic that is commented upon a great deal where husbands say, I want to help, just tell me what to do. And wives say, but then that leaves to me the task of keeping track of everything that needs to be done and subsequently allocating it. And I think all of these things are important to comment upon. And I think we've seen like improvement in people's awareness of them and willingness to discuss them, right? Like you hear about couples using that card game Fair Play to like divvy up the household tasks. And then you hear sillier sounding things about like, your friend texts you and says, my boyfriend dumped me and I'm sad. Can we watch a movie and eat ice cream? And you say, hi, I'm at emotional capacity today. Did you see that post? I've seen like multiple examples of posts like this, but can I pull it up?
Sure.
Okay, so this was a 2019 Twitter thread that everybody made fun of for a week. And it suggested that if a friend reaches out and asks for emotional support, that you should reply saying, hey, I'm so glad you reached out. I'm actually at capacity / helping someone else who's in crisis / dealing with some personal stuff right now. And I don't think I could hold appropriate space for you. Could we connect brackets later date or time instead / do you have someone else you could reach out to? And did you hear actually how, like, unintentionally my voice went up into the customer service register when I read that?
Yeah, it sounds kind of transactional.
Yes.
Like,
it sounds like an out-of-office message.
Yeah. And it's turning something as, quote-unquote, simple as just saying, hey, I'm not available right now, can we talk later, into trying to tread lightly around a friend's feelings.
And I think, like, I don't see how that could have not happened by bringing in a concept from the workspace into our personal lives. And maybe people find that a little bit comforting, like if I can get things to be structured and organized and transactional and neat and clean the way that I'm able to do with them at work in my personal relationships, then I could, pencil in my friend's breakup for Friday. And it's not that that's a bad thing to do. I hung out with a friend last night who went through a breakup a week ago. Last night was the soonest I was available to hang out. But I think that if I had responded to them by saying, hi, I'm at capacity right now, it's the tone.
Yeah.
It's the tone and the formality.
Yeah.
That people find so mockable when we apply it to our intimate relationships, and the inherently messy give and take of emotional support that I think anyone with a modicum of mental health expertise or even common sense will tell you that, like, keeping score of that kind of shit will not work out well for anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you hugged me when I was anxious last week 3 times, and so if I have 4 anxiety attacks this week, then we are uneven and we must write the ledger. That's not how relationships work.
Right.
And yet, there is this very real and very gendered imbalance where women are doing more of the emotional work of supporting men through their feelings than is being reciprocated. That men are turning more to women than they are to other men's. Like, I think that's a lot of what people are talking about when they talk about the male loneliness epidemic. A lot of what they're talking about is, men don't have friends as often, and if they do, they don't confide in their friends as often. They turn their softness only toward their romantic partner because it's not masculine to be vulnerable. And that does create undue burdens for women en masse, right? It's not like an individual problem. It's like a systemic problem. So yeah, how do you square those two conflicting things? The fact that, like, it's very silly to apply this professionalized lens of emotional labor to these intimate relationships, and the fact that there is a gender balance here of emotional work in our intimate relationships.
Yeah. And so I think maybe we've come to the point of, like, so what does this all mean? What does this tell us about loving each other better in a society?
Yeah. What do you think?
I think I want you to go first because I'm still trying to figure out exactly.
Not fair, because I feel like I just posed a question and I don't have the answer to it.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think the point with this is to have an answer, but more so to say, why did we talk about this? Yeah, what did we learn today? Like, I think, I don't know, maybe I will go first. Okay, so when I think of the term emotional labor, and I don't have the more academic history with it that you do.
Well, now you do.
Yeah, I'm beginning to, I would say, but that's still all swirling around in my brain. But just generally, if I hear the word emotional labor, I'm thinking of it as something that is maybe unique, not unique, but something that is a product of a capitalist society. Because, especially the labor part, because it's like the way that you provide value, or the way that you're expected to return value to society is via your emotions. And I think that it follows in a capitalist society that would be something that would inevitably develop, that when you have this Marxist superstructure of capitalism that is kind of at the foundation of society, that then emotions are themselves going to become labor.
Yeah, and I think what you just said dovetails with Hochschild's argument in the book. Actually, she talks about like emotional alienation that happens when you have to do emotional labor in the workspace, that when you are at work, you are alienated from your emotions, and how does that affect your mental health? Like, that's a very Marxist.
Oh yeah, alienation from the product of your labor. In the sense that
but in this case, the product of your labor is feelings.
Yes, and you're having to alienate yourself from your feelings in order to provide for someone else.
And that's, I think, so different from, like, when I'm providing emotional support for a friend, and I hope that when my loved ones are providing emotional support to me. Like, I'm thinking of last night talking to my friend who recently went through the breakup. They were saying, oh, it was so helpful to share this with you and get it off my chest. And I was like, no problem, dude. I was so excited for you to spill this tea. I was so invested. It was like my favorite soap opera. I hope that's okay with you. All I was doing was organically reacting.
Yeah.
Getting outraged on their behalf, empathizing with them, telling them the good things about them that I want them to know. None of that is effortful to me. It is the opposite of alienating myself from my emotions. It is being in touch with my emotions and being in the moment and connected with my friend. And there could be nothing more, nourishing than that. It is the opposite of draining. I'm thinking also of this one neat hack that you and I found recently of, I'm joking because it's like a very common strategy, but co-regulation, right? We realized that we were trying to talk through my anxiety, and what we needed was to calm my body down. And the strategy that we found for that is something that I hope is actually just straight up pleasant for you to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, so maybe I think the reason that we're talking about this today, or maybe the larger point that people should take away from this is first of all, to understand kind of the origins of emotional labor and where it came from.
And just to be mindful of that.
To be mindful of it, and to...
Because I think when we divorce feminist concepts from anti-capitalist critiques, we're losing something pretty meaningful. And that, I would even go so far as to say, that is where feminism has often gone wrong in the past 20 or so years, is divorcing feminist concepts from anti-capitalist and anti-racist critiques.
Yeah.
People don't connect to feminist concepts when you divorce them from those things that they're rooted in as much, because it's only part of the story. Right.
For someone listening to this going forward, I think not that we need to police our language, but that we should be mindful of the ways we talk about our specifically emotional labor with our loved ones. And it's important that we distinguish, at least at this point in history, the inevitable emotional labor that some jobs require from the emotional, I wouldn't call it labor, but the emotional...
Hochschild calls it emotional work.
Emotional work.
In our personal lives.
Yeah. So I think, at least for me, that's probably going to be my biggest takeaway. And what I would probably say is I would urge others to take away if they connect with that point. But what about you?
I think my biggest takeaway is like being mindful of buzzwords. Because I think a lot of the time, this is something that I've done, and I definitely hear other people do it too. You can lean on buzzwords that have like taken on a kind of more vague meaning through overuse as a way to avoid having to get really specific about what you're talking about. And that is not an effective communication technique. It's maybe an effective sounding kind of smart technique, but it's not an effective communication technique. And I think that is really different from language policing. I think language policing can be a moral purity thing. I'm not going to try to listen to the overarching point you made because you used the wrong word in making it. Whereas being mindful of how we use terms that have become buzzwords and speaking carefully and checking in with who we're speaking with to make sure that our points are getting across clearly is a good way to be heard and to connect, which is different, I think, from finding just the right language, finding just the right, I should say, terminology in order to avoid offending.
And I think that if you're having trouble with this in your life and you want to maybe a quick piece of advice, because I think I also have trouble with this. I feel that sometimes my vocabulary immediately that comes to mind is too limited. I think the best thing you can do is just read more.
Yeah.
Read from a variety of authors, read from a variety of different perspectives, and listen and think about the words that they use. And I think, as you were just saying, it's not about finding the right word. It's about finding what connects with who you're speaking to make sure that, because you're never going to understand exactly what is in someone else's head. But the whole point of language is to try to bridge that gap.
And that's what makes buzzwords dangerous. They become so vague, and because you don't know what's in somebody's head, they become a shortcut to avoid getting to whatever the specific thing is that you're actually trying to get at. It pains me when I have interactions like the one that I had this morning where you were making your post about our Para Cliffhangers fundraiser, and you were kind of hung up on whether to say people with disabilities or disabled people. And I was kind of thinking like, oh my God, that's so beside the point. Who cares which term you use? The point is that you're raising money for this programming that is so beneficial, right, to disabled people. And I think that anybody who would fault you for using the wrong terminology is really missing the forest for the trees. And like, it is also true that the words that we use are meaningful and tell a story and reflect our values. And it is true that terminology can be really load-bearing and can signal like identity markers and can be a substitute for actually thinking deeply, engaging in good faith, and wrestling with difficult ideas. And so I think that's something that I've learned from this conversation today, is like to interrogate my relationship with these buzzwords. And when I use one, think like, why am I using it right now? What do I mean by it? And then say that instead.
Yeah. Well, I am looking forward to, of course, by the time this episode comes out, I think it will actually be the day before Owl Night. So I'm looking forward to, as the first of our millions of listeners begin to hear these words, I'm looking forward to soon be climbing for 12 hours.
I can't wait to climb for 12 hours. We're going to suffer so much.
And we're gonna perform that emotional work that will strengthen our relationship.
I love you.
I love you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.